Good to go.
Got it. Thank you everyone for being here. This is our Outreach and Engagement Committee. I just want to start off welcoming any people in the audience. Thank you for coming. And to get us started, if Stephanie, if you can do roll call, please.
Morning. Ava Bermuda Zimmerman,
Present.
Adrian Cochran,
Present.
Sheila Hummel. Sheila has not joined us yet. Sal Luciano. Sal has not joined us yet. Molly Weston Williamson. Here. And Justin Zartman. Justin has not yet joined us, but we do have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll move right ahead. If for everyone who reviewed the minutes, I'd like the motion on the floor to approve the minutes from November 17th, 2022. Do I have a motion on the floor?
Motion for Molly.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. All in favor, say yeah. Yay or A.
Yay.
Yay.
No nays, so motion is approved. Going right ahead to some updates. I'll pass the virtual mic over to Jessica for some media presence engagement updates.
Thank you, Ava. Good morning again, everyone. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning. I was with AFLAC, so I apologize for being a couple minutes late.
You are just in time for the good stuff.
Excellent.
All right. All right. So today I wanted to just kind of take you over some high level statistics. I thought it would be kind of neat to look at the past 12 months of our website statistics, since this represents the time since we went live with claims on 12/1/21 through November 30th, 2022. So we had over 837,000 unique users. I was really hoping we'd hit 1 million, but I'm still pretty pleased with 837,000. That represented 2.1 million sessions and over 7.4 million page views. The average user is looking at just about 3.45 pages per session, and they are spending over 3 minutes with us. Pretty consistent, as we've seen throughout the year, that about 70 to 75% are new users, and then about 25% are returning users. Then I just wanted to kind of delve into some of the statistics representing our social media, especially as it relates to our paid efforts. So I looked at this by channel, and there's some interesting information in here. So for YouTube, this is now representing just the month of November, we had over 61,000 views. And interestingly, the majority of those happened on TV. So people are actually watching it on their sort of traditional big screen TV, followed secondly by mobile, and then smaller percentages on desktop and tablet. What I found really interesting is that the YouTube users who are watching our video are skewed male and are primarily in the 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 age ranges. So this is pretty different from what we normally see. We usually see more female. So I think it's interesting. And I also am pleased because it represents a balance, right, between the different channels that we're using. And we're hitting, some more men with our YouTube campaign. So I like those statistics. I like to be able to report that. On the Facebook side, in November, we had 203,000 impressions, and that generated over 5,300 clicks. And then this is sort of more typical of what we normally see. Most of those clicks came from women in the 25 to 34, and secondly, the 35 to 44 age range. And the best performing ad with a 3.46% click-through ratio was the newest testimonial that I shared in the last board meeting of the gentleman who used paid leave when he had some back surgery, and his wife talked about how that experience really helped their family feel more comfortable as he was recovering. So good indication that those consumer testimonials are resonating with people and getting them to take action, which is click on the ad and find out more about us. In LinkedIn, We had 565 clicks in the month of November, lower, but that's to be expected because it is a B2B platform. What I did want to share that I thought was interesting is so almost 31,000 impressions generated 565 clicks, but the industries that they came from, so insurance, internet, capital markets, legal services, higher ed, but the click-through rate, so the highest engagement came from the airlines and aviation industry, followed by hospitals, civic and social organizations, retail furnishings, transportation, religious institutions, this is primary and secondary schools, and repair and maintenance. Overall click-through rate was 4.13, but these categories represented somewhere between like a 3.8 and a 4.4% click-through rate. And then, as you know, we recently delved into the world of TikTok with some ads. So this is our initial reporting on that. 114,000 impressions delivered in the month of November. 82% of the ads were delivered to women and 18% to men. And then 726 clicks were generated also by over 80% female. And then you can also see the age breakdown. So primarily delivered to the 25 to 34 age range. And that's also the age ranges that generated the most clicks. Last is just a quick update on our Google AdWords. So we have Google AdWords campaigns running every single month. And I just wanted to share the two particular ads that I was really pleased with the click-through rates on. One was an education campaign focused on generating traffic for our webinar series. So this is just what the full text of the ad looked like when it showed up as a sponsored ad. So 12,000 impressions generated over 6,000 clicks. And we saw that reflected in our webinar numbers, particularly for the human resources webinars. Those have been really, really well attended this fall season. And then the other one was more of just a general awareness ad. Almost 35,000 impressions generated nearly 17,000 clicks. And then down here at the bottom, you can see the age ranges where most of those clicks came from. And so with that, I will stop sharing. Happy to answer any questions on any of those statistics or what we're doing on any of the platforms. Molly, yes, TikTok, I believe, does track impressions from people 18 to 24. I will double check with Miranda Creative, our partner that's helping us with that, and just see, just confirm that information. But I can't imagine they wouldn't be, because that is a big portion of their user audience. So I'll gather some more information on that and report back to you next time we meet.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions for Jessica? Thank you.
No, I was just going to say it's valuable information. Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah, if I was going to, same thing to say, didn't have a question, but had a statement, but I think that the entire team has been doing a really good job in accessing the various social mediums. And I think getting the word out. So anybody says, I don't know what this is, or I've never heard of it, or what does Stu's been under a rock or in a cave, over the past couple of years. So I do want to compliment the team on the really fine job you're doing.
Thank you. And I always get the pleasure of being the one who gets to report on it. But thank you for saying that, Adrian, because it truly is. And since our team is so small, yeah, it's like all hands on deck. We pull in people from all other departments who help us with it, who they're like, hey, I'm going to put on my outreach and engagement hat today and help with this. Amber is really wonderful with that. Stephanie helps us with that. People in all the other departments. So it really is a team effort.
And that just elevates my respect for you even higher, because you give credit to the team. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
I want to mention that Molly did write in the chat, world-class outreach effort. So that's great for those who didn't read it. I do have a question. So Jessica, I didn't see a representation. Jessica, I was wondering, I didn't see a representation of language differences on your social media. So I was just curious for ads or ads in Spanish and targeting, if the number of clicks are similar.
Yeah, that's a great question. I did not look into that specifically to put these slides together, but let me look into that. I know we do run ads in Spanish, but there also is the automatic browser translation that happens if someone is looking at all of their content in a different language. So I'll have to look into how, if that can be broken out just based on the browser language versus the ads that are specifically in a different language. Because we do publish ads in both English and Spanish.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Jessica. We next have our podcast update, but Nancy isn't with us. And then we have that followed by a legislative update, and Jacqueline couldn't be here as well. I was going to ask the authority team if there's someone who could do either a quick recap of what's going on.
I'll do the, Jess, do you want to do the podcast? I'll do the legislative.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And Nancy sends her apologies. She's not been feeling well. So, but she has been plugging along with the podcast. She has released a couple of new episodes. The newest one, which was just released this week, is on hospice care. And she spoke with the director of hospice and palliative care for Hartford Healthcare at Home. So that one was just released. And she has in the works, one on addiction and addiction as it relates to mental health as a serious health condition. I think that's the next one. And pleased that she was able to connect with Molly and one of Molly's colleagues and recorded a podcast on sort of paid leave on the national front, the efforts there, what's happening. And that is something that she's working on editing and hoping to release in early January.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Andrea?
Yes. So on the legislative front, we know that the election was held in early November, and the result of that were 36 new legislators, both in the House and the Senate. So Jacqueline sent congratulatory notes to those incumbents, and she also sent notes to those that were that are new to either either side of the body, the House or the Senate. And then we are scheduling briefings for the House Dems and the Senate Dems, and the same thing for the Republican side as well. And I don't think we have any independents, but everyone is welcome to join. We did have one for the Senate Dems on Monday, but that's been postponed. So we'll probably end up doing that sometime in the early part of next year. We were really trying to we're hoping to try to get to the legislators before the session starts, because it's a long session. They're going to get incredibly busy. But this is a really important issue for their constituents, and for new legislators, they probably don't have a sense of how it works and what they can expect. And so we wanted to make sure that they were educated. But it's interesting because when we give these primers to new legislators, we often get many incumbents who join as well. To get a refresher, which is always really nice, because we wanted everyone to be as educated as possible. We're also working on updating our legislator toolkit. We had one from last year, and obviously the statistics have changed, and some of the ways in which the program works are clearer now than they were then. So we'll have that and be able to provide that to the legislators and their aides. And that is really where we are. And then, of course, we always just make our way up to the LOB and make personal visits where we can, so that we can meet the leadership and work that way. So the leaders for the committees are now being assigned, and as they come out, Jacqueline is informing us of who they are, and then we'll also try to make some opportunities to meet with leadership as well. Especially for, our only committee of cognizance is labor, but we also have some crossover, and of course appropriations is always keeping a very close eye on what we do in the solvency of the fund. So we like to meet with the approps chairs as well.
I do have a question. Are we going to be expecting any legislative language, any correction, or any bills coming into session for the authority?
For the authority, not right now. We have a sort of a running list of small technical changes that we'd like to make, and some things that we've discovered that may have an inadvertent adverse impact. For as an example, the language now currently, and I think I may have said this before, but the language now currently reads that you're barred from getting any kind of paid leave benefit if you receive any state or federal benefit. But if you've been a victim of a crime and you receive some kind of compensation from the Office of Victim Services, I don't think we intended that to be a bar to you also receiving a paid leave benefit. But as it reads now, it reads as a bar. So that would be one of the examples that we'd want to see if there's a way to fix that. Also, more publicly, there's been more discussion about the impact of the paid leave program on the availability of short and long-term, really short-term disability benefits and the benefits coordination. Right now, there's no plan for there to be a legislative change to address that issue, but we're still in conversations with the insurance industry and with the labor chairs as to what some of the solutions to that might be, because just in a nutshell, people are experiencing a diminution in their short-term disability benefit payments from their employers because there's the availability of what is perceived to be a state benefit under the paid leave program. So what that means is, and there's always been this term and condition in short-term disability policies, if you have access to a state leave program, it therefore lowers the amount of money, or it allows the short-term disability plan to adjust the amount that you receive from that plan. And that's not been an expectation that people have had, and they're upset by it. So we're trying to find a way to come up with a solution, but there's been no suggestion that it would be a legislative solution. Okay.
Good to know. Anyone else has a question for Andrea? I guess not. Any other comments or questions, just general? Okay. Fast meeting. I guess we get some time back. Any old business? Any new business?
Yes, Dave and I would like to share an update on fund recovery and sort of how that process is going and what we're planning for outreach. So I will share my screen, and Dave and I will take you through that presentation. Dave, if you just want to tell me when you're ready for the next slide, that would be great, so I don't advance you too fast.
Will do. Thank you very much, Jess. I appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me at the meeting this morning. We are going to spend a few minutes talking about fund recovery. There won't be a lot of math in this presentation, I promise, but we did want to let you know our plans over the next few months, because outreach is a really big part of our fund recovery efforts. So we just wanted to start with some background information on what we've been doing and how we got here. So we have been doing some messaging that has been focusing on registration, getting employers to register with the authority. And to date, we haven't assessed any penalties or interest for late contributions or anything like that. We really just wanted employers to be aware of the program, aware of their filing responsibilities, assuming they were a covered employer with covered employees, that they had to collect on behalf of those employees and make payments to the authority. We had sent out some newsletters via email to those businesses that weren't registered yet, and that was back in January through September of 2021. We had gotten some information from the Secretary of State for those businesses, and that's how we started. In conjunction with that, the Department of Labor also offered up catch-up periods, 3 of them, in fact, that allowed employers, in addition to the 0.5% of contributions that they're required to withhold from employees for any quarter, to also take an additional 1% for any prior quarters that the employer was not compliant. And that happened, like I said, happened 3 times up through the first quarter of 2022. And we did communicate this catch-up period through several channels, including emails, newsletters, mass media, all the great things Jess and company do. In addition to that, the finance team also sent some letters to about 7,000 potentially non-compliant accounts. And in the process of sending those letters out, we received over $1 million in contributions from over 800 previously non-compliant employers in about the last 6 months. We also identified over 1,000 accounts that had been registered in error. Either the employers thought they were eligible or they weren't, or their third-party administrator, TPA, otherwise known as a payroll provider, just registered them. And then we discovered that they were not a covered employer, so they didn't have to be registered, or the business had closed during that time and thus weren't in business anymore, unfortunately, so they weren't going to be making contributions. Next slide, please, Jess. These are some examples of the communications we have sent out. This is all Jess. I take no credit for the design of these at all, but I'd be remiss to say that they certainly didn't contribute to the successful communications we've had so far. The item on the left was a postcard we sent out back in June 2021, and the items on the right were a letter or an email that we had sent out in February 22. And we got some help from the Department of Labor because we were able to cross-reference our list with the Department of Labor, determined if there were any businesses missing from our rolls, and send these notices out. Again, letting people know you need to register with the authority. We believe you're a covered employer. If you're not, let us know. You won't get a postcard anymore. And so that was part of our efforts over the last few months. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So as I mentioned, our focus so far has been on registration. We feel that's been really successful. We've registered over 140,000 covered employers. But to really move the needle and be successful further, we really need to shift that messaging now from registration over to contributions, which includes assessing fines, penalties, and interest for non-compliance. It's part of our fiduciary responsibility, and we should really do it in order to ensure continued fund solvency. It also assures fairness and equity because we want to make sure all covered employers are making their contributions appropriately. And so thus we feel a combination of refined messaging along with a new approach that incorporates better technology, more accurate information, and a consistent methodology to fund recovery will yield the results that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So what's the process we're going to use to get those results, and how are we going to measure those results? Process will be continued email and letters to those employers who are non-compliant, as well as their third-party administrators, if applicable. We will be updating notices with estimated data from DOL when it's available, and those notices will have penalties and interest on them. We will provide an additional payment mechanism to employers to make it easier for them to make contributions. That mechanism is called PayLink, and we'll be utilizing it to collect on prior amounts owed. We will also be utilizing the state's fund recovery vendor to assist in recovery of those contributions that are aging, getting older. The fund recovery vendor, this is what they do. They have the expertise in that arena So we will be going to them and asking for their assistance to collect on contributions. We'll also have a communications plan with the United Way Contact Us Center in order to manage the anticipated increase in inquiries. How will we measure this effort? 2 ways. Number 1, we'll be measuring the increase in the number of covered employers making contributions who were previously non-compliant, but now are. And second, we'll also be measuring the increase in the amount of contributions that have been remitted by those employers. And we'll be advising of our progress every 6 months to the board. Next slide, please. Spoke a little before about fines and penalties. We will begin implementing those in May 2023. That's right after the first quarter contributions are due for calendar year 2023. And again, that's in order to hold everybody who's an eligible employer accountable for remitting their contributions. If you pay before that, up through April 30th, 2023, there won't be any fines or penalties for anybody who pays their contributions in full for any period up to that point. And again, it holds all covered employers accountable in a fair and equitable approach. We estimate that we'll be following up on about 6,000 accounts with an estimated about $4 to $6 million in contributions that are potentially due to the fund, and we'll be following up on those. Next slide, please, Jess.
Thanks, Dave. So now I'm going to jump in and just talk about our messaging and how we're going to communicate this. So you see some images up here on the screen. These were created by Miranda Creative. And the sort of catchphrase, if you will, is every employee counts. Just sidebar, we know that this one looks like a 7. That will be corrected in the actual images. But the idea is to really continue to drive home this point that every employee counts. If you have 1 employee, you are likely eligible for this, covered by this program, and should be remitting those contributions. And so we want to display this imaging on sort of common items that might be used, especially by these smaller employers. So the hard hat represents the construction industry, the nail polish bottle, the nail salons, the guest check, the restaurants. So the idea is really to just continue to drive home, because we know that some of these non-compliant employers really still are not aware that this program applies to them because they are so small. So that messaging, every employee counts, will be sort of the core messaging as we move into this campaign. The media campaign we plan to launch in mid-January, and we will, as Dave mentioned, be informing people that fines and penalties will start on May 1st, but we'll also really be focusing on the fact that if any past due contributions can be remitted prior to that May 1st, there will not be fines and penalties for those individuals. So we want to make sure that if we're hitting people who were not aware, we don't make them panic. We let them know that they still have some time to get compliant before those fines and penalties go into effect. We're anticipating this campaign will run for about 3.5 months. After the first 2 months, which will be very heavy frequency and many different channels, will then reevaluate and see if we need to maintain that same level, if we can cut back a bit, or if we even need to increase our presence a bit. So the campaign will have 3 different targets. One, obviously, employers. So that will focus on education, compliance, and sort of the last opportunity to remit without fines. We feel we've had ample communication about the program, but we just want to let people know here's another opportunity. So still that messaging that we're here to help you, but also with a little bit more strength behind it, that now there is a consequence if you continue to not be compliant with the program. The second target is going to be employees, and this is what we call pull-through messaging. So while the employees are not the ones responsible for making the remittance, we want them to know that they should check and make sure contributions are being withheld because this is a benefit for them. And so we'll advise them to check with their employer or their payroll provider to make sure that that withholding is happening. And then the third will be messaging, again, pull-through messaging to payroll providers. So we'll sort of have dual messaging here, both to payroll providers and to employers. You know, if you're a payroll provider or if you use a payroll provider at your business, now's the time to check and make sure that these contributions are being withheld appropriately. Because we do want employers to understand that even if they use a payroll provider, they're ultimately the ones who are responsible to make sure that these contributions are being remitted. So those are our 3 separate targets. In terms of what channels we'll use, we are going to focus heavily on digital because we know that in such a fragmented media marketplace, this is really a very targetable medium where we can focus on business to business. We can also target by employee size, for example, or business size. So we'll be using Google AdWords, YouTube, programmatic display, Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. We'll also be doing email campaigns, partnering with chambers of commerce to get into their newsletters with this messaging. We'll be doing some mailers to some targeted audiences like CPAs and small bank loan officers. We'll do direct mail to payroll providers. We'll also make use of our radio messaging, and we'll place some ads in some of the different business journals like the Hartford, New Haven, and Fairfield County business journals. So we know we've presented you with a lot of information. We want to kind of give you the 3 key bullet points that we're hoping that you'll walk away from this presentation with. And those are that we're going to pivot our messaging, as Dave talked about, from registration to contributions and compliance with contributions. We feel we need to do this because it is our fiduciary responsibility. It ensures equity and fairness. And as Dave mentioned, it helps us ensure the solvency of the trust fund moving forward. We will be monitoring our progress. This is obviously the first time that we're moving into this sphere. So we will be monitoring the progress and then making changes to our approach and to our campaigns as necessary in order to be as successful as we possibly can. And so at this point, we'd really love to hear your feedback and suggestions. We value, you always have great suggestions for us. We value it very much. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this and any ideas you might have for how we can enhance what we're planning to do.
Any comments from our committee here?
I see Molly has her hand up, and I'm leaving this up so I can jump back to any slide if there's a particular area you'd like to look at.
I'm going to do my best to talk, but if you can't hear me, I may switch back to chat. I apologize again for being on the train, and this is amazing and so thoughtful. I had a couple of questions, some of which I think maybe more like Dave and Andrea questions. So my understanding is if an employer is coming into compliance now and has not been collecting the contributions from employees, the employer just has to pay the back contributions out of pocket, correct? They can't go back and recollect the employees, is that right?
That's right.
That is correct.
Thank you. And thank you, that's super helpful. And I guess the other question would be just to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So contributions should have started effective for 1/1/2022. So an employer in theory could have missed 2 years of contributions, pay them late, and not end up paying any penalties. Is that right? So basically all of 22 and all of 23, or excuse me, all of 21 and all of 22.
Theoretically, that's right. That's why we want to give them this, we're not really calling it an amnesty period, but just sort of one more opportunity to know that they, first of all, that they have the obligation and to be able to pay it, because 2 years of penalties and interest can be substantial. So we're really just trying to get them as compliant as possible. I may anticipate another question you may ask, which is, what happens if they can't pay the whole thing, because it could be a lot of money. Is that one of your questions or no?
It wasn't, but I would love to hear the answer.
Okay, sure. That's why we're working with the fund excuse me, with the fund recovery agency, because there will be an opportunity to have some kind of payment plan so that they can in turn have a chance to pay it all back, because we know, especially if you're a small business, it can be a substantial amount of money. So that's where we would go. We're not trying to create more financial hardship for businesses, but we do need to let them know that you have had 2 years to comply, and it's important that you do so. Unless they can strike some kind of deal with the Department of Labor, who has said to us that they're not really inclined to offer any more catch-up periods, then they'll have to work with us in our fund recovery vendor to create a way to catch up on their payments.
Got it. That's super helpful to know and makes a lot of sense. And I do think from the messaging perspective, not so much in the top level, beautiful, grand and creative stuff, but I think in the broader sort of longer form messaging, I think it's worth emphasizing that the agency that they offering, like, I know we're not using terms like grace period or amnesty period, but 2 years is a really, really long time. And I think just like making sure that, like, given that the authority has chosen to strike the balance between enforcement and education, like, I want the authority to get credit for how thoughtful and generous that has been. And I think just thinking about, and maybe this is already accounted for, but like, I do think, I am sure there will be some grumbling. I am sure there will be some folks who will say, well, I didn't know, I wasn't informed, but I think noting that this is a very, very long period of time to get that generosity, I do want to just make sure that having made that decision, that the authority sort of gets credit for that. And then I had one last very minor question, which is, I assume that one of the categories of employers where there's a lot of compliance issues are domestic employers. And some of those folks are just going to be tough to get to generally, but I'm curious if there's been any outreach specifically to payroll providers that work specifically with domestic employers, so like GTM or HomePay or folks like that.
So when you say domestic employers, do you mean people that provide personal care, or people who are acting as housekeepers and house managers? I just want to make sure I understand the definition.
Yeah, like nannies and housekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
We did-
Yes,
I'm sorry, Andrea. Go ahead.
that's okay. Go ahead, Jess.
Oh, I was just going to say, we did do some outreach. It was a while back, admittedly, but we did do some outreach to domestic employees via email campaigns. But I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think it's certainly worthwhile for us to do that again. I know when we did that, we actually discovered that the majority of people, the employers, that is the homeowners, did not realize that they actually were considered employers if they had a nanny that they were, paying through a normal payroll process. So we did do that previously, but I think it's definitely something that is worthwhile for us to do again. So thank you for bringing that up, Molly.
Molly, you're breaking up. We can go ahead and go to another question while Molly's internet resurfaces there. Does anyone else have another comment? Okay, thank you, Molly. She said she was done. Any other comment? I do have a comment, question, and a suggestion. So going to more recent, Jessica's part of the presentation, when you head on the screen, if you want to go back to the different channels, you're going to, there we go, the channels. I recommend on that list that you add the different state agencies that, similar to Molly's concern about domestic workers, outreach in the journals or the different versions of newsletters that other state agencies have to other workers. So I would add like the Office of Early Childhood. A good majority of those OEC providers are small businesses. Sorry about that. They have, anywhere from 1 employee all the way to 50 employees. So that's another opportunity. For Dave, in your part of the presentation, a curiosity that I had, you mentioned software that you were going to be implementing for pay collection. I forgot the name. It was in one of your slides.
Link.
Yeah, we can go back. Yeah, it's a fund recovery
Paylink?
system.
Paylink, okay.
Paylink, yes.
So Paylink, my curiosity with Paylink is when you as the employer go into Paylink, will it confirm that you indeed owe X amount of money and how much money you owe?
Oh, yes. So the way it is you will, the amount will already have been determined. And so you'll go to a screen and it'll let you know how much you owe. And actually there'll be some flexibility because if you're going in there to pay the contribution, but you disagree with the penalties or interest for whatever reason, you have the ability to pay the contribution without the penalty or the interest, and then communicate with us why you believe you shouldn't have to pay that. But the amount will be there for them. They're not going to have to second guess, like, how much is it? Am I going to have to calculate it myself? None of that. We'll have worked with them to determine that amount.
What is the verification to get onto Paylink? So if I'm an employer individual, how do I do a search of what I owe?
We
My
would send,
name, my business name.
we would send the link directly to the employer. The employer doesn't blindly go on there to a website and figure it out. We would, when we send the notice out, there'll be a link on that notice just for that employer.
So I wonder if there's a way, the employees that I represent in childcare and or employers, because they're small businesses, they've been very curious. I keep mentioning, please make sure that you're compliant. And many of the business owners I've spoken to, they use a payroll company or a third party. They don't do it themselves, and they don't always get the up to date or timely response that they need from their payroll or the person that they hired. And they've been asking me, how do I check? How do I go online to the authority and verify what I owe, or if the person I hired is compliant, without having to hassle them and continuously ask them, are you doing this right? So I was wondering, there is a way similar to, like, everyone who pays taxes. Most towns are part of that website where you put your name, and then it pops up if you're compliant with your taxes or not, how much you owe, and then it brings you to the payment portion. If there's a way to do that with folks who are non-compliant, so those individuals who maybe don't do this themselves, have no idea if they're compliant, could go in and just verify on their own accord without having going through a code or another deterrent, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Every employer has an account, and they could log on directly to I believe it's called One Account, Business One Account. And so they can look up and see if the payments have been made by their TPA on their behalf, and what have they been made. And the anticipation is also to post the information for the quarters that haven't been paid. And if an underpayment can be determined, we would post that amount as well there as well. So every employer has the ability currently, actually, to independently verify if the contributions have been made.
Is it possible on our main website to have a section and maybe a thought bubble where someone can click and say, these employers are non-compliant? Is that possible? And have embedded a spreadsheet so employees know and employers know?
It is, excuse me, it is possible, of course, but we are trying to be, quite frankly, respectful of the business community and really not be, we don't want to embarrass them, because some just don't know that they should be compliant, and they're not. We still, to Adrian's point earlier, you would think that there wouldn't be any business in this state that is unaware of their obligation or the existence of this
I
program.
fully know of people
But
who are unaware.
there are
Yeah.
many. So it really, we did think about that, and we talked about it a lot and decided against it, because it really isn't our intent to make public their obligation or to embarrass them. And it's also the reason that we declined to use billboards to announce to employers that they have this obligation, because we know that it's a pivot in the message. And so we really want to see how all of the processes that we've identified and the channels work first, and then see whether or not we get a significant degree of compliance. And then we will decide whether or not we need to be more aggressive. It just felt like a very aggressive move the first time. And so that's why we decided against it in this early phase.
Okay, well, the options are at the back of a pocket. They're
Exactly.
options. Yeah.
Exactly, because then, if we do this and then let's say we do it when we report in the first 6-month period, we get a fairly high number of employers that comply. And then even though we are reviewing every 6 months, we're giving a board report, we're reviewing the results every month, obviously, to see the compliance. If we see that there are just some that no matter how many times we send things to them and they're just not complying, then we may use a more aggressive measure to get them to comply.
Okay.
Okay.
I just again to point out that every time you have another link or another password, and I'm sure you guys know this, the likelihood of someone following through and going from one link to 2 links or another password it lowers the chances of them, keeping with the website. So I'm just thinking of the community that I serve, and there's thousands of people, and I've been down this road of compliance with other state agencies. When they're asking me for a list, and yes, embarrassment is a way for compliance. I'm just thinking a list, not in the sense of embarrassment. I'm just easy access of, am I compliant, or if I'm not compliant, so they could be compliant, is much faster than what is my password, or is there a CPA that I hired that knows my password? But that's very specific to the childcare community. A lot of the childcare providers that I work with, they do not do any of this, and probably do not know their own password to get on to verify.
Okay. Well, I'll let Jessica and her team think about this some more, but if it's specific to a particular community, then maybe there's a way to communicate with them. And we can think about ways we can do that.
I think offline, I'm gonna connect to Jessica, and like Jessica mentioned with domestic workers, it's been a long time since messaging happened. Same thing with childcare. So we do have a whole set of events happening around taxes and being compliant with against state agencies and federal agencies. So we can collaborate early January, February on the childcare end. I'm not sure if other workers have the same situation where they subcontract out all this work, but I'm sure we can have lessons learned and see what happens in that community.
Right. So I see Molly added something in the chat about, in addition to the Chambers of Commerce partnering with the trade associations as well. Molly, yes, we just didn't want to put every single thing on the slide, but we have a pretty significantly sized spreadsheet that has all of the other trade associations on it, so they will be getting emails as well.
Are CPAs on that list? CPA associations there? Okay, you guys are thorough. Well, that's great. Any additional questions? I'm all set. Sorry to take so much time up. Molly's good. Okay. Any other comments? Jessica, Dave, anything else you want to add? Andrea?
No, this is my last outreach and engagement committee meeting. So.
Well, that is very sad, Andrea. And you said it before I could mention it, because I was going to point that out. You have been instrumental. Your leadership has been amazing in the outreach, and always thinking very innovative and forward thinking in trying to get this done. So we appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Molly. It's an extraordinary team of people I've just really had the honor and pleasure of working with. So I am so grateful to everyone that I work with and to the board. I think Adrian and I are unique in that we work for boards, and we've been on boards, and we know what that experience has been in different environments. And I say this over and over again, that you're really one of the most extraordinary boards. You're that I've ever worked with. And you're active, you're engaged, you really care about what we do, and you offer suggestions and support and feedback, and all those things make organizations better and make those that work here better too. So I'm just really grateful to have had the opportunity to work with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And Molly also wrote, miss you, Andrea. Can't imagine a better inaugural leader, and excited for the next chapter for you and for the authority. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Ollie.
With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion, so moved, I'm sorry. Thank you,
Thank
Andrea.
Do we have a second?
Second, Molly.
Thank you,
I think we
Molly.
got
All in
thrown by
favor?
that last bit, like, woo, there's reality smacking us. Right?
Well, all in favor, say aye or yes.
Aye.
Yes. Motion approved, motion follows through. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I think you get like 7 minutes back.
Happy holidays, everyone, please.
Yes, happy holidays.
Thank you so much.
Take care,
Thank
everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Molly. Bye.